Deep Thinky here. Today I'm going to be discussing one of the most famous kidnappings in the world, and I'm pretty sure as soon as the picture appears behind me you're going to know who it is, and I am of course referring to Madeleine McCann. Her face has become worldwide known during the abduction in Portuguese on the 3rd of May 2007. The drama unfolded when a group known as the Tapper 7, which was a group of doctors that Jerry and McCain were a member of, and they were all holidaying in Portuguese in Spain, and it was nearing the end of their holiday when the Tapper 7 decided to go down to the local restaurant that was just near their rooms. Apparently the children were all asleep, so the Tapper 7 agreed that every 15 minutes they would take turns on making sure that the kids were safe. In the short time before this drama unfolded, Jerry McCain, Madeleine McCann's father, was the first to check on the children at 9 p.m. that night. He went up and checked the children every 15 minutes as the Tapper 7 agreed, but he did notice the door was a little bit open. He saw the twins and Maddie McCain there and didn't think nothing of it. As Jane Tenner came back from checking on, I'm assuming, all their kids, she noticed a strange man carrying what looked like a child in pajamas through the street. The way he carried her looked odd, but she just assumed that it was one of the parents from the resort picking up their kids from the local childcare centre. As the night goes on, at 9:30, Matt Orfield was the next to check on the children. He did notice the McCann's door was a little bit open, and he did see the twins, but oddly enough he didn't see Maddie McCann, but he assumed that everything was alright as nothing was disturbed. A little bit odd, if you ask me. Now fast tracking from 9:30 to 10 p.m. that night, it was now Kate McCann's turn to go check on the kids. At 10 p.m. she found the door open. She noticed the window was open and there was a big breeze. This is the first time they noticed that Madeleine McCann had gone missing, and immediately panic ran straight through the resort as they realized that a missing child was now missing. But this case is one case that just continues to get stranger and stranger as things go along. So immediately the British authorities offered their assistance to the Portuguese police, and the Portuguese police accepted. So about 3 weeks after, the British authorities brought in 2 specialist dogs, one that could detect bodies, the other that could detect blood. And this is where the strange part in it. The McCanns rented out a car about 3 weeks after Maddie disappeared, and yet in that car the dogs indicated a body had been there, and the dogs indicated a blood had been in that car. Now this isn't to say that this had anything to do with Maddie. The dogs simply indicated where you would want to search if you were looking for blood or a dead body, but certainly not, it doesn't indicate whose body or whose blood that may be. but it is very strange that a car rented 3 weeks after by the McCanns, both dogs indicated a body had been there and blood had been there. Now, I'm sure Portuguese police tried their best, but they were open-minded to the fact that Madeleine McCann was not abducted. And, once again, I'm sure they did their best, but then there are many things that just don't add up to this case. It's like when Jane Tanner witnessed a man carrying a child in pajamas, they assumed that this person was from the local childcare centre that had just picked up their child and was on the way home. Maybe they worked there, maybe they were a visitor, who knows. But at the end of the day, this was never followed up. And it's like, if a person had recently picked up a child, would they not have records of this happening? I mean, surely the creche has some sort of security. Before they allow a child to be picked up, they'd have to make sure it's the father. So would they not have some sort of records to go track that person down and just say, hey, we need to confirm this around about 9:30, 10 o'clock, whatever, that you actually picked up your child. Now, the fact that this was not done leaves me just a little bit suspicious about some sloppy investigation into Madeleine McCann. As the years went on, obviously Madeleine McCann was not found. And let's jump forward to the 23rd of February 2023, and then enter Julia Wendell, a young 23-year-old lady who had an Instagram page, who stated she was Madeleine McCann. And she even had her Instagram page, I am Madeleine McCann. Creating an Instagram page saying I am Madeleine McCann certainly drawed attention to her. She got the attention of a lot of people, and yet she had a few followers who supported her. But as we both know, the community, the online and social network community, can be real mean. So her announcing to the world that she might be Madeleine McCann was met with horrific abuse, and we're talking death threats to her life, everything, just trying to say that she's insane, she's mental health, she needs help. So that can be really mean about how the community treated her. Now, once again, I realise this case is getting strange, but when Julia Wendell came on the scene, the Madeleine McCann case got very, very strange. And she did report it to the police and the British Embassy and even the Polish Embassy. And yet it was nearly a year before anyone even remotely listened to her. 1 year. So let's put that into text. You have someone walking into a police station and the embassy saying, hey, I might be a kidnapped girl, the kidnapped girl Madeleine McCann, who was 3 years old, who was kidnapped in 2007, and basically they did a small investigation, but they dismissed her claims pretty quickly without even investigating it. Now I'll go into how they should have investigated it a little bit better and how they could have, but they didn't. They just closed the case, rubbing her off as some sort of mental case, as some sort of crazy, attention-seeking person. So then it gets worse. On the 20th of March 2023, Julia Wendell appeared on the Dr. Phil show, and with psychic and private detective Fire Johansson. Please excuse me if I got that wrong. And, so it gets really, really weird that police have ignored her, the embassies have ignored her, the British has ignored her, the McCanns have ignored her, and suddenly, what could be a missing girl has to turn to Dr. Phil. We all know him, and so that's very strange. Shouldn't the police be handling this? Julia Johansson, the private detective and, of course, psychic, stated on the Dr. Phil show that she had sent one of her team members to 3 different hospitals to try and track down the birth certificate. The first hospital had never even heard of Julia Wendell. So they recommended 2 other hospitals. But then the person that was sent to track down these birth certificates had the same response. Out of 3 hospitals, no one had even a copy of the birth certificate. No one could find anything. And I would just like to reassure that the police never did this. It was a private psychic detective. Shouldn't the police have tried to track down Julia Wendell's birth certificate to prove or disprove who she says she might be? Now, when trying to discover if Julia Wendell is Madeleine McCann, you have to start looking between them. And there are similarities. For one, the big one is Maddie McCann and Julia Wendell have the same defect in the same eye, known as leucomba. Please excuse me if I said that wrong. But then there is also the photos of when Julia was little and the last known photo of Maddie McCann. And now people have said these photos look nothing alike. These are 2 different girls. My response is, look at the photos. Are you kidding me? I'm supposed to believe that they're 2 different girls. Now, these photos do not prove that she is Madeleine McCann. But once again, it is coincidental evidence that sort of seems to stack in Julia's favour of maybe she is Madeleine McCann. Julia has a lot of coincidental evidence in her favour. So let's discuss what this coincidental evidence is. 1, she's got the same defect in the exact same eye. 2, she did grow up in a trailer park that was reasonably close to where Maddie disappeared. 3, there is no birth certificates at any hospital. They can't really find any. Despite 4, she has no photos of her anywhere before she was about 6 years old. There also seems to be no medical records before she's 6 years old. She just sort of seems to have appeared on the planet. Now, each child has a healthcare sort of diary that is given by the government, the Polish government, and her diary, healthcare record diary, doesn't start until she is 6 years old. To me, the photos look very similar. Another 2 coincidental things that are in her favour is apparently David Payne, the close friend of the McCanns and one of the Tapper 7, also had connections to the family Julia grew up with. Now, enter Christian B. He is one of the main suspects in the McCanns' disappearance, abduction, whatever you want to call it. But I stress, nothing has ever been proven with him, but he is also said to have had connections with the family that Julia grew up with. Now, of course, all of these things do not prove that she is Maddie McCann, or, any sinister thing has happened surrounding her. But at the same time, it's interesting. It is a lot of coincidental things that require further investigation by the Polish and British police, which so far they have not done, despite there being $20 million and 100 detectives trying to solve the case, and they seem to ignore these things. Some other coincidental stuff is investigator Thea Johansson noticed that they do have the same birthmark on the face. Their pictures do look similar, and Julia does have memories that sort of suits the luxury Spanish resort. So when it comes to coincidental evidence, the evidence is interesting at best. And if I was if I was the investigator on this thing, there is no way I would be ignoring these things. Once again, people have sort of stated, why did Julia try to reach out on social media like she did with an Instagram account saying, I am Madeleine McCanns? The British police and the British police, the British embassy and the Polish embassy. She was rated by the police as some sort of a nut job, as some sort of mental health patient who's trying to get attention. She then has been abused online, receiving threats, death threats, abuse, calling a faker, mentally ill person. These poor McCanns have lost their daughter, and then you're faking it. And then when she tried to contact the McCanns and go there personally, she has now been arrested for stalking. So all these people out there who say, well, why did she use social media to sort of contact? Why didn't she do it privately? Look at the response that she got when she tried doing it the other way. So this is one thing that makes me angry about this whole case. The case was pretty much shut down. But let's look at how they shut it down before the police really did anything. Here are some facts about this before they shut down. Is the McCanns refused to take a DNA test. So there is no evidence to prove or disprove that she is their daughter or not. The family Julia grew up with also refused to take a DNA test, so there is no evidence to prove that they are her real family or not. There was evidence collected at the crime scene, and yet police didn't even think to match Julia's DNA with the evidence at the crime scene to prove or disprove her claims. And then we have last is on the Dr. Phil show, we had Dr. Phil organise a ancestral DNA, which is not the correct DNA test for her, but then it is technically the wrong DNA test that really doesn't prove if she's the McCanns or the people she grew up with or a member from the crime scene. It doesn't really prove anything. But you sit there and think, at the very least, the police should have organised an ancestral DNA test if this test proves or disproves who she's saying that she might be. And of course, when does Dr. Phil become an investigator to do the police job? So once again, it just shows sloppiness. There was 4 chances with DNA testing to either prove or prove, and nothing got done, so they just sort of shut down the investigation, caught a fraud, see you later. Well, personally, I've got nothing against Dr. Phil. I think he gives some good advice. But in this case, he did wrong. Because at the end of the day, the test everyone says, oh, the test she took on Dr. Phil proves she's not the McCanns. No, it doesn't. And you know why? Is because it was an ancestral DNA test. It simply gives her what her DNA is. But then here's the thing, it came back 100% Polish. But then here's the thing, in DNA testing, you don't always identify with the country that you grew up in. So your genes might be 100% Polish, but you might be like 70% British. Just because your genes identifies you as one country, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. It certainly doesn't prove that the McCanns she is their daughter, or the people that she grew up with, or match with the crime scene. So did Dr. Phil do the wrong thing? Yes, he did. He gave the entire world the impression that this test proved somehow that she was not Madeleine McCann, when that is not true. And I'm sorry, Dr. Phil, I really got nothing against you, but you should have known better than this test doesn't prove nothing. And then you've gone and told the whole world, well, it does. Well, a parental DNA test does not. And here's the thing, if someone's accusing me of being the father of their child, and this person is from the UK, and then I suddenly just do an ancestral DNA test and I say, oh, I got 100% Australian DNA, in a criminal court of law, it would never be accepted when I'm trying to avoid child support. So at the end of the day, an ancestral DNA test would never be accepted as a parental DNA test. You did the wrong thing, Dr. Phil. Now, online people, including investigators, the media, her mum, the parents she grew up with, I guess, and the McCanns, have pointed out that she is a mentally ill, attention-seeking child. Well, and then she has a lot of mental issues. Well, let's just look at that. If she really is Madeleine McCann, and then she lived this beautiful life up until 3 with her brother and sister and siblings and the McCanns, and then suddenly one night, she is snatched away from the only life that she knew, and then she is forced to live with these strangers that she doesn't even know. How scary would that be for a child? And then she's told, oh, your name is no longer Madeleine, it's Julia. And then, you're a certain age. How scary would that be for a child? And, it would be very scary. So, of course, these people, the online community, the media, everyone claims that they will say that you are mentally ill as attacking her. But the reality is, it may be true. She may be mentally ill if she experienced that. If she's experienced a kidnapping and then a whole life turned around and suddenly she's told, her name is something different and she's living with different people who might treat her bad, of course she's going to have mental illness. And then another thing is, that wasn't truly investigated, is by the time she was 7, it is reported that she was on 35 pills a day for her mental health. Let me tell you something. I work in mental health myself, and for a 7-year-old to get 35 pills a day is unheard of. So at the end of the day, what is behind this? Was this justified? Can the doctor or the medical establishment that was giving her this treatment, 35 pills a day, can it be justified? That's my question. When it comes, and that's also a thing that the police did not do before they shut down the case, is did any investigator try and track down the medical establishment or the doctor who authorised this 35 pills a day and then sort of said, well, we need proper medical experts to see if this diagnosis is validated, to see if it is justified. And to my research, no investigator tried to investigate it from a medical standpoint about whether this 35 pills a frickin' day for a 7-year-old was justified. Another strange aspect of this case is Julia seems to have different names. Let me just read some out. It's Julia Wendell is the most common, but she's also known as Julia Wendellette, and she's also known as Julia Fostonola. Please forgive me if I said that wrong. So her mother's name is Julia Wendell, Wendellette Klowinski, and her stepfather's name is Peter Klowinski. So even her own mother doesn't even have a name that matches her. Now I understand that she may have, if she really is this Julia and not Madeleine McCann, she may have a father out there that has a different name than her mother took when she married her stepfather. But the reality is there's 3 different names here. Now, I've tried to research this and can't find anything on it, but this just doesn't make sense. For a woman to have 3 different names that is not the same as her mother or her stepfather, even if she has the same name of her biological father, why is there 3 different names? Enter David Payne. Let's bring David Payne back into the situation. The trusted friends of the McCanns. Now, Julia says that as soon as she saw David Payne on the television, she recognised him. Apparently, David Payne had connections to Julia's family that she grew up with. Well, at the end of the day, didn't police ever check that out about what his connections were? He was at the resort, he has connections to the McCanns, and apparently he has connections to the family Julia sort of grew up with. To me, that is mega suspicious. And after investigating what the police did on the case, I can't find anyone who actually followed that up and asked for an explanation as to how he knew the 2 families. And to me, that says, if it's true, if Julia Wendell is telling the truth, which we only have her word, we don't know if she is, but if she is, then there is a connection between the 2 families. Strange. So let's get back now to the investigation. And once again, so the police never matched Julia Wendell's DNA to that of the crime scene. But then later on, a little bit later, as recently as late 2024, I think it was, Julia got in touch with a forensic expert who actually did match Julia's DNA to the DNA in the apartment. And surprisingly, it came back with a 69.8% match, which is much higher than a random person. Now people have pointed out, well, it's not 100% match. But remember, her ancestry test from good old Dr. Phil said she was 100% Polish. So if she's 100% Polish and have no connections to the McCanns, why on earth did her DNA come back a 69.8% match? Now this is strange. Now at the end of the day, a lot of people say, well, it's not 100%, so that proves she's not Madeleine McCann. But let's dive into some facts about what we know about why that might have been. The facts on why the DNA might have not come back at a match is, I've just got a list here, is it was 9 days before the apartment was sealed off for a crime scene for proper DNA testing. And 2 different families had used that apartment before any DNA testing had taken place. So that is one. The fact is also Madeleine McCann and her 2 twin siblings used the same toothbrush, which I do find very odd indeed, considering the McCanns are doctors. Couldn't they afford their children's toothbrushes? And I'm willing to bet you if they used the same toothbrush, they probably used the same hairbrush as well. Might have even used the same spoons. So that's interesting. So the McCanns, on being doctors, should have known that. So proper DNA testing. So the simple reason as to why it didn't come back 100% match might have been because the results had been mixed with other people mixing. So maybe like when they thought they got Maddie's DNA, they actually may have got some of Maddie's DNA, but they might have got other people's match DNA mixed in with it that had used the room as well. And then you've also got the fact of there was the Tapper 7. They all had kids, but it was never explained, were all the kids in one room or were all the kids in their room? Now to me it would make sense that if you had a group of 7 people and you agreed to, take turns every 15 minutes checking on the kids, it would make sense to me to have all of those kids in one room, because like if someone had to go out every 15 minutes to check every single room, it'd just be a never-ending merry-go-round. It would make sense. So the question is, which I don't have the answer to, were all the Tapper 7 kids in the same room as Maddie and her twin siblings? That is a question that needs to be answered. That might be one of the reasons why it didn't come back a perfect match, because it was so contaminated. Or, maybe the investigators got one of her twin siblings' DNA and thought it was Maddie's, and that's why it also didn't come back a match, is their brother and sisters and stuff like that. But it didn't come back a match because they got the wrong DNA. Considering the sloppiness of this investigation, it wouldn't surprise me. But then there is another possibility. If Julia Wendell is not Madeleine McCann, could it be that she was in the apartment that night? So when they got the DNA that they thought was Maddie's, it was actually Julia's. It got a little bit contaminated with everyone else there, and that's why it didn't come back a big match. So that's a theory. I've got no evidence to support that, but it is a possibility. Is somehow was she in that apartment shortly before Madeleine disappeared? Now, if that's the case, that needs to be explained. In conclusion, the case was shut down. No DNA testing of the McCanns, no DNA testing of Julia's alleged parents, no DNA testing of the match from the crime scene, and police didn't even supply an ancestral DNA test. We have, McCann's not interested in proving or disproving. We have Julia's parents not interested in proving or disproving. She goes to the embassy, they ignore her. She goes to the police, they ignore her, shut down. No explanation is given. And then we have things like, she was on 35 tablets a day, and yet no one bothered to track that down. We have 3 different hospitals that can't find her birth certificate. There seems to be no medical records of her before she was 6. People ignore the fact that they do look the same, and she has the same birthmark, she has the same eye defect. Police need to be ashamed about how they've handled this case. They really do. It is ridiculous, because there are so many avenues that could simply prove or disprove. And, you know, a lot of people say the reason why the Mcanns don't take a DNA test is because, you know, the heartbreak if it turns out it's not her. Well, I say to the Mcanns, you know, if you want to at least eliminate certain possibilities about your daughter, you have to take a few punches in the gut. It may hurt to find out she's not, go through a DNA test, find out she's not your daughter. It's just something you have to do. And Julia Wendell, the parents of Julia Wendell grew up, it's something they have to do to either prove or disprove. So this case is absolutely ridiculous, because the police can either prove or disprove Julia Wendell is Maddie McCann or not very, very quickly. And yet, you know, we've had, you know, psychic detectives, we've had Dr. Phil, we've had people, you know, just sending Julia Wendell death threats, and the police and the embassy and even the Britons not even taking it seriously. And of course, we have the Mcanns, who have taken a restraining order out on her and had her arrested for stalking. Incredible. And at the end of the day, there's no evidence to either prove or disprove, but it would be very easy to obtain. I think Julia Wendell, there is a good chance Julia Wendell is not Maddie McCann. I think there is a reasonable chance at that. But I also believe that there is many aspects of the case that has not been done. The police have done a terrible job. The police, media and the community is not interested in learning the truth. And then this points to an even bigger question. It doesn't matter if she is Madeleine McCann or not. This points to the question about how do we handle children that are abducted. And then, you know, if someone comes up, you know, 10 years after a child is abducted and say, oh, I was that child that was abducted 10 years ago, and if the police, the media, the community treat those people the way they have treated Julia Wendell, it would just indicate on how pathetic and bullshit the system is when trying to locate missing children. It really would. And what does that say about us, about the society? She's gotten death threats from people, she's got abuse, she's being attacked, you're mentally ill, ignored by the police, restraining order, and, you know, arrested for stalking. And the biggest sad fact would be if she turns out to be Maddie McCann. That would be a huge disaster, because you look at the way we've got a kidnapped child here. If she really is Maddie McCann, we've got a kidnapped child here saying, hey, I'm the kidnapped child, and then we've got the entire world saying, shut up, you crazy bitch, we're not even going to investigate or even try and prove. And this goes to prove that no one wants answers. The McCanns don't want answers. The family that she grew up with doesn't want to cheer. The police ain't interested. The media is, like, you know, not interested in finding the truth, and neither is the community. So, you know, everyone is not interested. And the big question is why? This is the big question. And what does it say about us as a world, as a community, when we handle investigations like this, the way this poor girl? I think there's a good chance she is not Maddie McCann. There's a reasonable chance, but I think whether she is or is not important. It's the way that it's been investigated. no one is even interested in the truth. No one is trying to find answers. The McCanns should be ashamed of themselves. Julia Wendell, the family that she grew up with, you do have something to prove. And the investigators and the British police and the British embassy, you've got a lot to answer for. And I'm sure Portuguese police did their best, but they're not really equipped too well to, find children the way the Western world is. But then it's a question of how equipped is the Western world, because we probably can do better investigations, but we choose not to. I'm Deep Thinky. If you have any information on this case at all, I encourage you to at least call the police or call someone. I hope you like. If you like this video, gives it a thumbs up, subscribe. I'm Deep Thinky. Bye.